Well, swell evening, traveler. Welcome to Lazarus and Son's undertaking. Are there any matters or condolences I could bestow upon you? I was hoping to join the viewing of my uncle Eddie V. Oh, yes, yes, he's located within the lower level, sir. Yet, I must ask you to surrender to me any devices of communication capable of being used externally of the establishment. You know the law, man. Absolutely, yeah, that's no issue at all since there's none on me. I said all devices must be stored with me. Thank you. I'm sorry for my inobservance. Oh, worry yourself not. It's of no concern that our dual business is discovered. I doubt if Uncle Sam or the lawman would be even believe this place would exist amidst the numerous rumors. Now, child of Adam, what can I pour for your parched voice? Just a whiskey on the rocks, please, with some citral bitters. Your wish is my command. If I may ask, what would you say the greatest tool mankind has ever acquired in its vast and formidable arsenal? Oh, I'd say something along, say, automobile, airplane, or the warships. I've worked on a couple of those when I was drafted. Childish. How would one come to any of those without the manipulation of one of God's most prized possessions? Fire. Man was deemed unworthy of such a power that it was divinely held from their grasp, until Prometheus came to humanity and bestowed its power among its newly ordained wielders. I don't understand, if not entirely. Fire allowed man to shatter the grasp of Mother Nature itself, breaking off its hold and taking the apple they bit with them. Man believed he was comparable to God, as if the following the path of Satan within his own envy grew and disillusioned man to believe he was God. First man builds fires, then he builds bombs, all with the intention that he could create life symbolically or literally, only to be faced with the horrors of his own doing. Cat got your tongue? Excuse my passion. I see your drink is casting its spell upon you. And to my benefit, it's been ages since I could eat. Letter 1 to Mrs. Saville, England, St. Petersburg, December 11th, 17. Ongoing. You will rejoice to hear that no disaster has accompanied me the commencement of the enterprise which you have regarded with such evil forebodings. I arrived here yesterday, and my first task is to assure my dear sister of my welfare and increasing confidence in the success of my undertaking. I am already far north of London, and as I walk in the streets of Petersburg, I feel a cold, northern breeze play upon my cheeks which braces my nerves and fills me with delight. Do you understand this feeling? This breeze, which has traveled from the regions towards which I am advancing, gives me a foretaste of those icy chimes. Insprinted by the winds of promise, my daydreams become more fervent in desolation. It ever presents itself to my imagination as the region of beauty and delight. There, Margaret, the sun is forever visible, its broad disk just skirting the horizon and diffusing a perpetual splendor. There, for with you leave, my sister, I will put some trust in preceding navigations. There snow and frost are banished, and sailing over a calm sea, we may be wafted to a land surpassing in wonders and in beauty of every region hitherto discovered on the habitable globe. Its productions and features may be without example, as the phenomenon of the heavenly bodies undoubtedly are in those undiscovered solitudes. What may not be expected in a country of eternal light, I may there discover the wondrous power which attracts the needle, and may regulate 1,000 celestial observations that require only this voyage to render their seeming eccentricities consistent forever. I shall satiate my ardent curiosity with the sight of a part of the world never seen before visited, and may trend a land never before imprinted by the foot of man. These are my eccentricities, and they are sufficient to conquer all fears of danger or death, and to induce me to commence this laborious voyage with the joy a child feels when he embarks in a little boat with his holiday mates on an expedition of discovery up his native river. But supposing all these conjectures to be false, you cannot contest the inestimable benefit which I shall confer on all of mankind to the last generation by discovering a passage near the pole to those countries, to reach which at present so many months are requisite by accentuating the secret of the magnet, which, if at all possible, can only be effected by an undertaking such as mine. These reflections have dispelled the agitation with which I began my letter, and feel my heart glow with enthusiasm which elevates me to heaven, for nothing contributes so much to tranquilize the mind as a steady purpose, as point on which the soul may fix its intellectual eye. This expedition has been the favorite dream of my early years. I have read with ardor the accounts of various voyages which have been made in the prospect of arriving at the North Pacific Ocean through the seas which surround the pole. You may remember that a history of all the voyages made for the purpose of discovery composed the whole of our good Uncle Thomas's library. My education was neglected, yet I was passionately fond of reading. These volumes were my study day and night, and my familiarity with them increased. That regret which I had felt as a child on learning that my father's dying injunction had forbidden my uncle to allow me to embark in a seafaring life. These visions faded when I pursued for the first time those poets whose infusions entranced my soul and lifted it to heaven. I also became a poet, and for 1 year lived in paradise of my own creation. I imagined that I also might obtain a niche in the temple where the names of Homer and Shakespeare are consecrated, who you are well acquainted with my failure and how heavily I bore this disappointment. But just at that time I inherited the fortune of my cousin, and my thoughts were turned into a channel of their earlier bent. 6 years have passed since I resolved on my present undertaking. I can, even now, remember the hour from which I dedicated myself to this great enterprise. I commenced by injuring my body to hardship. I accompanied the whale fishers on several expeditions to the North Sea. I voluntarily endured cold, famine, thirst, and want of sleep. I often worked harder than the common sailors during the day, and devoted my nights to the study of mathematics, the theory of medicine, and those branches of physical science from which a naval adventure might derive the greatest practical advantage. Twice I actually hired myself as an undermate in the Greenland whaler, and acquitted myself to admiration. I must own I felt a little proud when my captain offered me the second dignity in the vessel and entreated me to remain with the greatest earnestness, too valuable did he consider my services. And now, dear Margaret, do I not deserve to accomplish some great purpose? My life might have been passed in ease and luxury, but I preferred glory to every enticement that wealth placed in my path. Oh, that's some encouraging voice would answer in the affirmative. My courage and my resolution is firm, but my hopes fluctuate and my spirits are often depressed. I'm about to proceed on a long and difficult voyage, the emergencies of which all demand all of my fortitude. I am required not only to raise the spirits of others, but sometimes to sustain my own when theirs are failing. This is the most favorable period for traveling in Russia. They fly quickly over the snow in their sledges. The motion is pleasant, and my opinion far from agreeable than that of an English stagecoach. The cold is not excessive if you are wrapped in furs, a dress which I have already adopted, for there is a great difference between walking the deck and remaining seated motionless for hours. When no exercise prevents the blood from actually freezing in your veins, I have no ambition to lose my life on the post road between St. Petersburg and Archangel. I shall depart for the latter town in a fortnight, or 3 weeks, and my intention is to hire a ship there, which can easily be done by paying the insurance for the owner, and to engage as many sailors as I think necessary among those who are accustomed to the whale fishing. I do not intend to sail until the month of June, and when shall I return? My dear sister, how can I answer this question? If I succeed, many, many months, perhaps years, will pass before you and I may meet. If I fail, you will see me again soon or never. Farewell, my dear, excellent Margaret. Heaven shower down blessings on you, and save me, that I may again and again testify my gratitude for all your love and kindness. Your affectionate brother, R. Walton. Letter 2 to Mrs. Seville, England, Archangel, March 28th, 17. How slowly the time passes here, encompassed as I am by frost and snow, yet a second step is taken towards my enterprise. I have hired a vessel and am occupied in collecting my sailors. Those whom I have already engaged appear to be men on whom I can depend and are certainly possessed of the dauntless courage. But I have one want which I have never yet been able to satisfy, and the absence of the object of which I now feel as a most severe evil. I have no friend, Margaret. When I am glowing with the enthusiasm of success, there will be none to participate my joy. If I am assailed by disappointment, no one will endeavor to sustain me in dejection. I shall commit my thoughts to paper, it is true, but that is a poor medium for the communication of feeling. I desire the company of a man who can sympathize with me, whose eyes will reply to mine. You may deem me romantic, my dear sister, but I bitterly feel the want of a friend. I have no one near me gentle yet courageous, possessed of a cultivated as well as a conspicuous mind, whose tastes are like my own. To approve or amend my plans, how would such a friend repair the faults of your poor brother? I am too ardent in execution and too impatient of difficulties. But it is still greater evil to me that I am self-educated. For the first 14 years of my life I ran wild on common and read nothing but our Uncle Thomas's books of voyages. At that age I became acquainted with the celebrated poets of our own country, but it was only when it had ceased to be in my power to derive its most important beliefs from such a conviction that I perceived the necessity of becoming acquainted with more languages than that of my own native country. Now, I am of 28 and in reality more literate than my schoolboys of 15. It is true that I have thought more and that my daydreams are more extended and magnificent, but they want, as all painters call it, keeping, and I greatly need a friend who would have a sense enough not to despise me as a romantic, an infection enough for me to endeavor or to regulate my mind. Well, these are useless complaints. I shall certainly find no friend on the wide ocean, nor even here in Archangel, among merchants and seamen. Yet some feelings unallied to the dross of human nature beat even in these rugged bosoms. My lieutenant, for instance, is a man of wonderful courage and enterprise. He is madly desirous of glory, or rather, to my phrase, and more characteristically, of advancement in his profession. He is an Englishman, and in the midst of national and professional prejudices, unsoftened by cultivation, retains some of the noblest endowments of humanity. I first became acquainted with him on board of a whale vessel. Finding that he was unemployed in the city, I easily engaged him to assist me in my enterprise. The master is a person of excellent disposition, and remarkable in the ship for his gentleness and the mildness of his discipline. This circumstance, added to his well-known integrity and dauntless courage, made me very desirous to engage him. A youth passed in my solitude, my best years spent under your gentle and feminine fosterage, has so refined the groundwork of my character that I cannot overcome to intense dissolute to the usual brutality exercised on board the ship. I have never believed it to be necessary, when I heard of a mariner equally noted for his kindliness of heart and the respect and obedience paid to him by his crew. I felt myself peculiarly fortunate in being able to secure his services. I heard of him first in rather a romantic manner from a lady who owes him the happiness of her life. This briefly is his story. Some years ago, he loved a young Russian lady of moderate fortune, and having amassed a considerable sum in prize money, the father of the girl consented to the match. He saw his mistress once before that destined ceremony, but she was bathed in tears and throwing herself at his feet, and entreated him to spare her, confessing at the time she loved another, but he was poor, and that her father would never consent to the union. My generous friend reassured the suppliant, and on being informed of the name of her lover, instantly abandoned his pursuit. He had already bought a farm with his money, on which he had designed to pass the remainder of his life, but he bestowed the whole of his rival, together the remains of his prize money, to purchase stock, and then himself solicited the young woman's father to consent to the marriage of her and her lover. But the old man decidedly refused, thinking of himself bound in honor to my friend, who, when he found the father exonerable, quitted his country and returned until he had heard that his former mistress was married according to her inclinations. What a noble fellow, you will exclaim. He is so, but then he is wholly uneducated. He is as silent as a Turk, and kind of ignorant carelessness attends him, which, while it renders his conduct the more astonishing, detracts from the interest and sympathy which otherwise he would command. Yet do not suppose, because I complain a little, or because I can conceive a consolation for my toils, which I may never know, that I am wavering in my resolutions. Those are as fixed as fate, and my voyage only now delayed until the weather shall permit my embarkation. The winter has been dreadfully severe, but the spring promises well and is considered as remarkably early season, so that perhaps I may sail sooner than I expected, or I shall do nothing rashly. You know me sufficiently to confide in the prudence and considerates wherever the safety of others committed to my care. I cannot describe to you my sensations on near prospect of undertaking. It is impossible to communicate to you the conception of the trembling sensation, half pleasurable and half fearful, with which I am preparing to depart. I'm going to unexplored regions, to the land of mist and snow, but I shall kill no albatross. Therefore, do not be alarmed for my safety, or if I should come back to you as a worn and woeful as the ancient mariner. You will smile at my illusion, but I will disclose a secret I have often attributed my attachment to, my passionate enthusiasm for dangerous mysteries of the oceans, to the production of my most imaginative of modern poets. There is something at my work in my soul which I do not understand. I am practically industrious, painstaking, a workman to execute with the perseverance and labor. But besides this, there is a love for the fact of the marvelous, a belief in the marvelous, intertwined in all my projects, which hurries me out of the common pathways of men, even the wild sea and unvisited regions I am about to explore. But to return to my dear considerations, shall I meet you again after having traversed the immense seas and returned by the southern cape of Africa or America? I dare not expect such success. Yet I cannot bear to look on the reverse of the picture. Continue for the present to write to me by every opportunity. I may receive your letters on some occasions when I need them most to support my spirits. I love you tenderly. Remember me with affection should you have never hear from me again. Your affectionate brother, Robert Walton. Alright, let's get this letter going. Letter 3 to Miss Seville, England, July 7th, 17. My dear sister, I write a few lines in a haste to say that I am safe and well advanced on my voyage. This letter will reach England by a merchantman now on its homeward voyage from Archangel. More fortunate than I, who may not see my native land, perhaps for many years. I am, however, in good spirits. My men are bold and apparently firm on purpose, nor do the floating sheets of ice that continually pass us, indicating the dangers of the region towards which we are advancing, appear to dismay them. We have already reached a very high latitude, but it is the height of summer, and although not so warm as it is in England, the southern gales which blow us speedily towards those shores which I so ardently desire to attain breathe a degree of renovating warmth which I had not expected. No incidents have here, though, befallen us that would make a figure in a letter. One or two stiff gales and the springing of a leak are accidents which experienced navigators scarcely remember to record, and I shall be well content if nothing worse happen to us during our voyage. Adieu, my dear Margaret. Be assured that for my own sake as well as yours, I will not rashly encounter danger. I will be cool, persevering, and prudent. But success shall crown my endeavors, wherefore not? Thus far as I've gone, tracing a secure way over the pathless seas, the very stars themselves being a witness and testimonies of my triumph, why not still proceed over the untamed yet obedient element? What can stop the determined heart and resolve the will of man? My swelling heart involuntarily pours itself out thus, but I must finish. Heaven bless my beloved sister, R.W. Letter 4 to Miss Seville, England, August 5th, 17. So strange. An incident has happened to us that I cannot forbear recording it. Although it is very probable that you'll see me before these papers can come to your possession. Last Monday, July 31st, we were nearly surrounded by ice, which, closed in on the ship on all sides, scarcely leaving her the sea room. In which she floated, our situation was somewhat dangerous, especially as we were compassed around by a very thick fog. We accordingly lay to hoping that some change that would take place in the atmosphere and weather. About 2 o'clock, the mist cleared away, and we beheld stretched out in every direction vast and irregular plains of ice which seemed to have no end. Some of my comrades groaned, and my own mind began to grow watchful with anxious thoughts, when a strange sight suddenly attracted our attention and diverted our solitude from our own situation. We perceived a low carriage, fixed on a sledge drawn by dogs, pass towards the north at the distance of a half-mile, a being which had the shape of a man, but apparently a gigantic stature. I sat in the sledge and guided the dogs. We watched the rapid progress of the traveler with our telescopes until he had lost among the distant inequalities of the ice. This appearance excited our unqualified wonder, and we were, as believed, many hundred miles away from land. But its apparition seemed to denote that it was not in reality, so distant had we supposed. Shut in, however, by ice, it was impossible to follow his tracks, which we had observed with great attention. About 2 hours after the occurrence, we heard the ground sea, and before the ice broke, we freed our ship. We, however, lay until the morning, fearing to encounter in the dark those large loose masses, which flow about the breaking of ice. I profited this time to rest for a few hours. And the morning, however, as soon as it was light, I went upon deck and found all my sailors busy on one side of the vessel, apparently talking to someone on the sea. It was in fact the sledge, like we had seen before, which had drifted towards us in the night on a large fragment of ice. Only one dog remained alive, but there was a human being within it, whom the sailors were pursuing and to enter this vessel. He was not, as the other travelers seemed to be, by a savage inhabitant of some undiscovered island. He was a European. When I appeared on deck, the master said, "Here is our captain, and we will not allow you to perish on the open sea." On perceiving me, the stranger addressed me in English, although with a foreign accent. "Before I come on board of your vessel," said he, "will you have the kindness to inform me whether you're bound?" You may conceive my astonishment on hearing such a question addressed to me from a man on the brink of destruction, and to whom I should have supposed that my vessel would have been resource which he would not have exchanged for the most precious wealth that earth can afford. I replied, however, that we were a voyage on discovery towards the northern pole. Upon hearing this, he appeared satisfied and consented to come on board. Good God, Margaret, if you had seen the man who's thus capulated for his safety, your surprise would have been boundless. His limbs were nearly frozen, and his body dreadfully emaciated by fatigue and suffering. I never seen a man in such a wretched condition. We attempted to carry him into the cabin, but as soon as he quitted the fresh air, he fainted. We accordingly brought him back to the deck and restored him to animation by rubbing him with brandy and forcing him to swallow a small quantity. As soon as he showed signs of life, we wrapped him in blankets and placed him near the chimney of the kitchen stove. By slow degrees he recovered and ate a little soup, which restored him wonderfully. 2 days passed in the manner before he was able to speak, and I often feared that his sufferings had deprived him of understanding. When he had come in some measure recovered, I removed him to my very own cabin, and attended on him so much as my duty would permit. I never saw a more interesting creature. His eyes, generally an expression of wildness and even madness, But there were moments when, if anyone performs an act of kindness towards him or does him any of the most tiefling service, his whole countenance is lit up, as you know, it would beam of benevolence and sweetness I've never saw equaled. But he is generally melancholy, despairing, and sometimes he gnashes his teeth as if he was impatient of the weight of the woes that impress him. When my guest was a little recovered, I had great trouble to keep off the men who wished to ask him 1,000 questions. But I would not allow him to be tormented by their idle curiosity. In the state of body and mind whose restoration evidently depended upon the entire repose. Once, however, the lieutenant asked why he had come so far from the ice in so strange of a vehicle. His countenance instantly assumed an aspect of the deepest gloom, and he replied, "To seek one who fled from me." "And did the man whom you pursued travel in the same fashion?" "Yes." "Then I fancy we have seen him, for the day before we picked you up we saw some dogs drawing a sledge with a man in it, and across the ice." This aroused the stranger's attention, and he asked a multitude of questions concerning the route and the Damien, as we called him, and pursued soon after. When he was alone with me, he said, "I have doubtless excited your curiosity, as well as the good people, but you are certainly too considerate to my inquiries." "Certainly, if you would indeed be very impertinent and inhuman in me to trouble you with any inquisitiveness of mine." "And yet you rescue me from strange and a perilous situation. You have benevolently restored me to life." Soon after this, he inquired if I thought that breaking up the ice had destroyed the other sledge. I replied that I could not answer with any degree of certainty, for the ice had not broken until near midnight, and the traveler might have arrived at the same place of safety before that time. But of this I could not judge. From this time a new spirit of life animated from the decaying frame of the stranger. He manifested the greatest eagerness to be upon deck, to watch for the sled which had been appeared. But I had persuaded him to remain in the cabin, for he is far too weak to sustain the rawness of the atmosphere. I promised that someone would watch for him and give him a notice if any new object should appear in sight. Such in my journal relates this strange occurrence to the present day. The stranger had gradually improved in health, but it's very silent, and appears uneasy when anyone except myself enters the cabin. Yet his manners are so conciliating and gentle that my sailors are all interested in him, although they have been very little communication with him. For my own part, I began to love him as a brother, and constant and deep grief fills me with sympathy and compassion. He must have been a noble creature in these better days, being now even in wreck so attractive and amiable. I said in one of my letters, my dear Margaret, that I should find no friend on the wide ocean. Yet I have found a man who, before his spirit had been broken by misery, I should have been happy to possess as a brother of my heart. I shall continue my journal concerning the strangers at intervals, should I have any fresh incidents to record. August 13th, 17. My affection for my guest increases every day. He excites at once my admiration and pity, astonishing degree. How can I see so noble of a creature destroyed by misery without feeling the most poignant grief? He is so gentle yet so wise. His mind is so cultivated, and when he speaks, although his words are cold with the choicest art, yet they flow with rapidity and unparalleled eloquence. He is now much recovering from his illness and is continually on deck, apparently watching for the sledge that preceded his own. Yet, although unhappy, he is not utterly occupied by his own misery, but that he interests himself deeply in the projects of others. He has frequently conversed with me in my mind, and which I communicated to him without disguise. He entered attentively in my arguments in favor of eventual success, and into every minute detail measures I've taken to secure it. I was easily led by sympathy, which he invites me to use the language of my heart, to give utterance to the burning ardor of my soul, and to say with all fervor that warned me how gladly I would sacrifice my fortune and existence, my every hope to the furtherance of my enterprise, One man's life or death were a small price to pay for the acquirement of knowledge which I sought for the dominion I should acquire and transmit over the other elemental foes of our race. As I spoke, a dark gloom spread over my listener's countenance. At first, I perceived that he was trying to suppress his emotion. He placed his hands before his eyes, and my voice quivered and failed. As I before, tears trickled fast behind his fingers. A grunt burst from his heaving breast. I paused at length, and he spoke in a broken accents. Unhappy man, do you share my madness? Have you drunk also the intoxicating draught? Hear me. Let me reveal my tale. You will dash your cup from your lips. Such words may have imagined strongly excited my own curiosity, but the paroxysm of grief that seized the stranger overcame his weakened powers, and many hours of repose and tranquil conversation were necessarily to restore his own composure. Having conquered the violence of his feeling, he appeared to despise himself for being such a slave of the passion, and quelling the dark tyranny of despair, he led me again to converse concerning myself personally. He asked me the history of my early years. The tale was quickly told, but it awakened various trains of reflection. I spoke on my desire of finding a friend, on my own thirst that imitate the sympathy with my fellow mind than have ever fallen to my lot, and expressed my conviction that man could boast of little happiness who did not enjoy the blessing. I agree with you, replied the stranger. We are unfashioned creatures, but half made up, if one wise better, dearer than ourselves, such as a friend ought to be. Do not lend his aid to perfectionate our weak and faulty natures. I have once had a friend, the most noble of human creatures, and am entitled, therefore, to judge respecting friendship. You have hope in the world before you, and have no cause for despair. But I have lost everything, and could not begin life anew. As he said this countenance, he became expressive of calm, settled grief, and touched me to my heart. He was silent and presently retired to his cabinet. Even broken spirit as he is, no one can feel more deeply than he does the beauties of nature. The starry sky, the sea, and every sight afforded to these wonderful regions seem to tell the power of elevating his soul from earth. Such a man has a double existence. He may suffer misery and be overwhelmed by disappointments. Yet, when he retired into himself, he was like a celestial spirit that has a halo around him and whose circles no grief or folly ventures. Will you smile at the enthusiasm I expressed concerning this divine wanderer? You would not if you saw him. You would have tutored and refined books in retirement from the world, and therefore somewhat fastidious. But this only, readers, you the most fit to appreciate the extraordinary merits of a wonderful man. Sometimes I have endeavored to discover what quality it is which he possesses, that it elevates him so immeasurably above any other person I ever knew. I believed that the attentive discriminant of a quick but never failing power of judgment and a penetration into those things unequaled for clearness and precision add to this faculty of expression and a voice whose varied intonations are a subduing music. August 19th, 17. Yesterday the stranger said to me, You may easily perceive, Captain Walton, that I have suffered great and unparalleled fortunes. I had determined at one time that the memory of these evils should die with me, but you have won me to alter my determination. You see, for my knowledge and wisdom, as I once did, and ardently hope that the gratification of your wishes may not be serpent to sting you, as mine has been. I do not know the relation of my disasters will be useful to you, yet when I reflect, you are pursuing the same course, exposing yourself to the same dangers which have rendered me what I am. I imagine that you may deduce an apartment of moral from your tale, one that may direct you if you succeed in your undertaking, and console you in your case of failure. Prepare to hear of the occurrences which are usually deemed marvelous. Where were among the tamer scenes of nature, might to fear encounter your unbelief, perhaps your ridicule, but many things will appear possible in these wild and mysterious regions, which have provoked the laughter and unacquaintance that the ever varied powers of nature, nor I could doubt that my own tale conveys in its series of internal evidence of the truth of the events which it is composed. You may easily imagine that I was much gratified to offer the communications, yet I could not endure that he should renew his grief by a recital of his misfortunes. I felt that the greatest eagerness to hear the promised narrative, partly from curiosity and partly from a strong desire to ameliorate his fate. If it was in my power, I expressed these feelings in my answer. "I thank you," he replied, "for your sympathy, but it is useless. My fate is nearly fulfilled. I wait but for one event, and then I shall repose in peace. I understand your feeling," continued he, perceiving that I wished to interrupt him. "But you are mistaken, my friend. If thus you allow me to name you, nothing can alter my destiny. Listen to my history, and you will perceive how irrevocably and determined." He then told me that he would commence his narrative next day when I should be at leisure. The promise drew from me and the warmest thanks. I resolved every night when I am not imperatively occupied for my duties to record as nearly as possible in his own words what he related during the day. If I should be engaged, I will at least make notes. This manuscript will doubtless afford you the greatest pleasure, but to me, who know him and who hears it from his own lips, with what interest and sympathy shall I read it from some future day? Even now, as I commence my text, his full-toned voice swells in my ears. His lustrous eyes dwell on me with all their melancholy sweetness. I see his thin hand raised in animation, while the lineaments of his face are irradiated by his soul within. Strange and harrowing must be his story, frightful, the storm which embraced the gallant vessel on its course and wrecked it. Thus,